Hello, I'm Carol Runnebaum, the Seniors Real Estate Specialist with Coldwell Banker American Home. And I am here today with Roger Ashelman with CoreFirst Trust. And I wanted to visit with you today a little bit, Roger, and learn a little bit more about what a trust and trust department can do for seniors and maybe other folks.
Sure.
But before we get going, before we get started, Roger, do you feel comfortable taking your mask off for the interview?
That'd be great. I'd prefer to breathe.
Okay, yeah, that
Great.
helps with those interviews,
Well,
that's for sure.
We're
So,
far enough apart that we should be okay.
I think so, yes, yes. Well, thank you again for joining us
Carol,
today.
you're very welcome.
And so, as a seniors real estate specialist, I am finding more and more of my clients, they either have trust or maybe some of them have been asking me about a trust. And could you explain a little bit about what that process and what a trust is?
Sure, Carol. Trusts are a little bit mythological, that people think they're somehow just reserved for rich people and that they're special. And the reality is they're really an awesome financial and legal tool to help any person better arrange their own affairs and then control their own life. They're in charge of their own affairs while living. If incapacitated, then they have another trustee to take care of them. And when they pass away, the trust handles the administration of all their final affairs. So if you put a house in the name of your trust, you're eliminating a lot of steps over a lifetime of redeeding, retitling, going through probate, having your kids fight over things. A trust can really be a very powerful way to organize your life and after.
Oh my goodness, it sounds like it's pretty detailed and intense process. You mentioned putting a house in trust, and that it can be possibly passed on to the children or whoever you designate that house to be passed on. Then once it's passed on, does that house remain in the trust or is it in their name at that time?
That's another great question. A trust, if you or I have our trust, it's ours while we're alive. It's our living trust, and it's a revocable trust. We can turn it off and be done with it if we wish to. When we pass away, our revocable trust becomes irrevocable. It's permanent.
Oh, okay.
And what happens next depends on what you or I have put into the words into the trust. If I were to say, when I die and my wife passes away, then our trustee should sell the house and give the money equally to the kids, that's what happens.
Okay.
If you had a disabled child and you thought it very important they have a permanent place to live, you could say, when I pass away, I want my trustee to keep the house, maintain the house, and let my daughter live there for her lifetime, rent-free, until such a time she passes away. And then, here's what you do with the house. At that point, you sell it or give it to another generation. So trusts are that powerful because if you can think of words to say, it's almost surely legal to do.
My goodness.
Yeah.
It's very extensive then, very extensive.
Yes.
So you mentioned revocable trust and irrevocable trust a little bit. Can you expand on that any? Or?
Sure. I have my own living trust. It is revocable.
Okay.
My wife has her trust. It is revocable. As long as we are competent adults, we can change those trusts anytime, amend them in any way.
Oh, okay.
And if we wish to, we can revoke them in their entirety and start over a whole different way. We can turn the trust off and park it. Okay? An irrevocable trust happens when a person becomes legally incapacitated or they pass away. At that point, all the instructions that they put in place while they're alive are locked in and shall happen in the future.
Okay.
Because the most simple way to say it is a trust is a legal contract between the person that creates the trust, you, and the trustee who's going to manage the trust. And for a revocable trust, you and I are almost surely going to be our own trustees. It's my trust. I'm the trustee, I'm the beneficiary, life goes on. If I pass away, then a new trustee comes in, usually a bank like CoreFirst Bank and Trust, and we manage the trust according to the exact terms in the document because we're legally bound to do what that trust says to do.
Okay, so you're the manager. A company like CoreFirst would be the managing party for this trust once
A future trustee.
a future trustee.
And in most documents, that's called a successor trustee.
Okay.
And I'm not being mercenary, I'm just saying it's our job to do that, so we highly recommend banks, CoreFirst especially.
Well, yeah.
But you don't have to name a bank or any financial institution. If you wish, you could name a spouse as your successor trustee. You can name children as successor trustees. You can name your neighbor down the street who sells used cars for a living as your successor trustee. But
Probably they don't have the experience, though.
in our experience, you get what you pay for.
Yeah, that's
just like
true.
just like
Everything else in the world.
you get good service.
You bet. Yes, yes. So, if you have a trust, do you need a will, or vice versa? If you have a
Right.
will, do you need a trust?
Fantastic question. It's really one of the most common things most people don't deal with end of life
That's
till
true.
they die.
Until it's there, yeah.
Or in our cases, as our parents age, all of a sudden it's in our laps. They've died. Now what happens? So it's a
Sandwich
mystery.
generation
Yes,
here.
yeah. So here's the shortest version. A will is a legal document that is written by an attorney, and it's a set of requests to a judge.
Okay.
If you have a will, you're saying, "Dear judge, when I die, here's what I want you to do with all my assets. Give them to these people in this order over this time frame." A judge doesn't have to do that.
Oh, they don't.
You read about it with every celebrity that's ever died. Their will is contested, somebody
Contested,
files,
yes.
and a judge says, "Oh, I disagree, and I want to do it this way instead."
Oh, okay. All right.
So a will only has power when you die. It's not in effect while you're alive. It's just a guidance
Okay.
after you die.
Okay.
And the process of doing a will is called probate.
Right.
That's what
We've
everybody's
all heard
of,
that.
but nobody knows what it is. So your executor, the person you named to execute your will before the judge,
Which many times is not an attorney.
almost always going
It's
to be
a
a
child
spouse or a
or-
child,
yes.
right? And we'd recommend a bank that does it every day, all the time. But your executor takes your will, goes to court and says, "Judge, here's a will. You see that I'm named to be the executor. Please appoint me to do that." Because you can name an executor and the judges say, "No, that's stupid. I'm not going to name that person.
Oh my goodness.
I'm
they
going
can
to name
even do
somebody
that.
else to handle it correctly."
Interesting.
And at the end of that time, when you go through the probate process, what happens at the end is the judge says, "Everything that was in Roger's name as an individual, I now grant the authority to rename and retitle to somebody else." So instead of Roger's car, the judge says that can be his wife's car. Instead of Roger's house, that can be his wife's house. Instead of Roger's account, that can be his children's account. All that retitling has to be done by the executor after the judge says you can do it.
Oh my goodness.
Okay?
Okay.
So probate, you have to die. A will, you have to die. And then everything happens with the approval of the court.
Okay.
A trust happens the day you sign it. So most trusts say, "Hi, I'm Carol. I'm a living, functional human being. This is my trust. This trust is for my benefit, and I'm the trustee, Carol. I'm going to manage my own affairs as trustee for my own benefit as beneficiary. If I become incapacitated, then I name my spouse to be the trustee to take care of me, manage my affairs, and continue to follow the terms of the trust document. And if my spouse becomes incapacitated through old age or illness or accidental death, then I name this successor trustee to step in and run the affairs and do what the document says, which is first, take care of me.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
And when I
right.
pass away, then distribute assets on these terms, and there's no court involved. There's no probate process involved.
Oh my
There's no
goodness.
oversight. There's no one looking in saying, you can't do that. A trust document is private, and it's in effect the day you sign it, not the day you die.
Okay. Okay. So it sounds like after someone dies and maybe it's a home to sell or assets to be divided, that can happen right away or pretty darn quickly.
Lots faster.
A lot faster
And
than a
again,
will.
free of interference of the courts or free of prying eyes, free from beneficiaries who think they should be getting something but you don't think they should. Right? If a person is not named in a trust to receive something, they're not entitled to know the contents of the trust.
Okay.
So
this is not a recorded document.
that's correct.
Now,
It's
a
private
will
document.
is a will a recorded
A
document?
will can be filed in advance before you die, but it's not used until somebody goes in and turns it on, the executor.
Right.
Usually they're not filed until someone passes away.
I see.
All right?
Okay.
But then it is recorded and then it's a public record. And if you want to go to the courthouse and start looking through wills to see who left what to whom, there's a great record there.
Yeah.
A trust,
So this keeps it private. A will, or a trust
Yeah.
will keep your affairs private.
absolutely.
Wonderful.
And they're much more powerful. A will is considered a loosely constructed document. A judge can come in and say, I disagree. And people can oppose it and contest it and make a good case. And a judge can say, yeah, I agree with you, and so I'm not going to do it. So they're loose. A trust is considered to be a powerful, strong document. The court system believes that if you create a trust, you have a level of aptitude and intellect and skills and abilities where you understand exactly what you are trying to do. Therefore, they're going to honor those wishes. And outside parties have very little chance of cracking a trust.
Well, that's great
It is great.
information.
It's extremely
Yes,
powerful and good for the person that creates the work.
in today's world where we find so many different family units,
Yeah.
things can get kind of hairy pretty darn quickly, and
Yes.
with the loss of a loved one sometimes. And so
A lot of trusts are specifically designed to help protect family harmony in the future.
that sounds great.
Yeah, well, you've seen it selling
Yes,
houses. You've
yes.
seen kids get in there squabbling over knickknacks and household goods and belongings.
Right.
A trust takes care of that.
Yeah.
Spells things out.
The original owner still has that control and
The
was
controlling
able
hand
to.
beyond the grave
Yes.
is a real thing, and it's
Yes.
powerful in a trust, and it's weak in a will.
Yeah, well, that sounds great. Well, Roger, what other questions should I be asking, maybe that I don't know to ask?
Well, let's talk a little bit just about houses.
Yes.
All right. I'm Roger. I'm almost 60 years old. My house has been in a trust since 1988.
Okay.
And that was before I was a trust officer. I didn't know what the power of a trust was. I just listened to an attorney friend who said, you need to do this, and I did it. And he turned out to be right. The transitional process, when you buy a house, you're at that closing, all those documents, your deed is being created then by the closing company or an attorney.
Correct.
And it says, Bob and Ann Smith, jointly tenants, right? That's probably the most common way we see houses.
Sure.
Right? If one or the other of them dies, one of them should go file a new deed, removing the old one. Even though they
Correct.
jointly get it, they still should clean the record up, right? To eliminate fraud or abuse or identity theft or any other concern.
Which is so widely spread, identity theft nowadays.
Yes, horrible. Right? And then the second spouse dies, and that deed is still in the name of, now it's Mary Smith, and if she has a will, the executor, which is maybe her son or her daughter who's never done this before, has to go hire an attorney. The attorney takes them into court. The child then is before the judge saying, here's what my mom said to do, which is give the house to my sister and I. And the judge says, okay, you can go ahead and do that. Well, then what happens? Are two adult kids going to live in a house together? Are they going to agree to sell it, not sell it? Are they going to agree to rent it? Are they...
Agree is the big word you're saying
Yes,
there.
right? How do you find those agreements? And if you put your house in a trust the day you buy it, you know, if you have your trust created, you title it to your trust, your trustee for the rest of your life has that process under control, free of courts, free of interference from kids who might squabble if that's what you say to do. So if your house is in a trust, you can, some examples. We very commonly see, you know, this is the Bob and Mary Smith Trust. It's for our benefit. If one of us dies, everything that's in the trust is for the other person. So the house is ours, and it's still, now it's mine, just one. And then the trust would say, and when the second person dies, I want the house to A, go to child A. B, go to child B. Other assets might be given to the other child.
Right.
It could say, C, I direct my trustee sell the house. No matter what the kids say, just sell the house and split the money equally. Or I direct my trust, sell the house and give all the money to a charity. Or I direct the trust to give my house to a charity and let them sell it.
Right.
If you can think of a way to distribute your assets, you can put it in the trust that way.
Okay.
All right. So there's this, you get a seamless transition of ownership of property over time.
Right.
Free of the courts, free of those court expenses.
Okay. So, say you're working with a couple and they have a trust, but it's been years and the seniors have obviously gotten older and maybe they have kind of forgotten that they have a trust. How does the family know this?
That's a really good question too. I'll back up a half a step and then I'll try to answer your question. When you create a trust, you create a legal document that's a legal binding contract between the person that created it and the trustee with all those instructions of what shall happen. At the same time you create the document, you create this big empty financial basket.
Okay.
And that trust controls what's in that basket. So if you have a house and it's Carol's house rather than Carol's trust house, it's not in the basket and the trust doesn't control it.
Okay.
So if anything gets left out of the basket of assets, you're going to wind up going to court to use your will because it's not controlled by the trust.
Okay.
Then you have the worst of both worlds because you spent money on a great trust document, you had a plan, and you didn't do it. So you have this execution of whatever is in the trust. And at the same time, you got to go to court and do a whole probate process.
Okay.
You're spending twice the money to do really complicated things.
Okay. But the deed would show that it's in the trust, is that correct?
When you have to do it, you have to file a deed to do that.
Okay.
And that's called funding. You fill that basket up, that's called funding the trust. F-U-N-D-I-N-G, funding the trust. And as a trust officer, we spend a lot of times with people reviewing their trust document as it's being written at the beginning, and then helping them fill the basket up. And we're glad to do that. You know, we don't charge anything for that. We're just trying to help people get on track at the beginning to stay on track the rest of their lives.
Okay.
Right.
So do you meet with your clients through, you know, you have the appointment, you set up the trust, and then do you stay in touch with the clients to see if there's things that need to be added along the way?
You're exactly right, and that gets back to the question you asked, which people can forget things, and they can lose track of things. What we try to do is meet, you know, once a trust is up and running, let's use your age. You know, a lot of folks our age don't use a professional trustee yet. They still are their own trustees.
Okay.
Let's meet once a year or so, and let's review your life circumstances. You have new children, well, not you or me, but new
grandchildren, maybe.
Grandchildren, right? Have there been other family additions through marriage or deletions through death or through divorce? Have you acquired new assets that might be more complicated? Have you picked up a vacation home out of state? Which means if you don't handle that correctly, you're going to have probate in 2 states. Right? So we would love to visit with our future customers, you know, on a regular basis, and update assets and make sure that that item is in the trust. And if an item is not in the trust, why not? And it's okay not to have things in the trust as long as you know why and you know how it moves otherwise.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, Roger, you've cleared up a lot of questions for me, and I hope for our public as well. I'm sure you have. I would like you to go ahead and give us your name again and your contact information and the company that you're with.
All right.
So people know how to get in touch with you.
Thank you. I'm Roger Ashelman at CoreFirst Bank and Trust in the Trust Department. You can call me at 267-8782, and I'd be pleased to visit. I'll come to you. If you like, you can come in and say hi. We are practicing social distancing and mask wearing. So if people are uncomfortable, we can visit on the phone.
Okay, well, great.
But really pleased to do it. That's why we're in business.
You bet. Well, thank you. I appreciate your time today.
You're welcome, Carol. Thank you.
You bet. Bye-bye.